Again, thank you, everyone. So first of all, I just want to say, and I think on behalf of the Senate, and also I believe, on behalf of the delegate Cullison, and she'll feel free, is that we very, very much appreciate, value, respect, not only the practice of social work, but each one of you for the time that you've given to this work. And that you've taken every meeting seriously. You've come with an open mind. You've come with being solutions oriented, being collaborative, and looking forward to the overall benefit of your clients, your family, and also a commitment to the values of the practice of social work. So please, I can honestly say that anything from the state of Maryland, well, in other words, the views or what you heard today articulated by the Board of Examiners does not reflect the position or the values, of the state of Maryland on a whole in terms of commitment to equity. We have to do a better job at doing it and looking at all the ways to enforce it. But I want you to know your time was not wasted. Your time is valued. The work will continue. And I guess I'll speak more to that to explain why I killed my own bill, on the floor. But again, I just want to remind, everyone that's listening that we came to this policy position and this decision, or at least, sort of my tracking of it started in 2021 when Illinois removed the exam as a requirement for applying. And it also, according to the NASW in Illinois chapter, before the law went into effect, only 421 social workers became licensed, and then right away afterward, more than 2,600. Utah then also did that. And so, given, we're in COVID, we're coming into COVID, HGO and finance were already looking, at addressing the challenges associated with taking the licensure exam, the kind of spotty notification provided by ASWB, coming up with a scenario to provide for sort of temporary licensure. So that the whole sort of motivation, or the whole sense of that it's really important to ensure the accessibility of the exam became really relevant in 2021. The disparities in the result, of course, of the exam came by a self-published report in 2022. A good friend of mine and a licensed social worker, Jessica Strauss, shared with me on December 2nd a statement by SWARE, which is the Social Workers for Equity and Against Racism, the organization. And she sent their statement to me, and it was proposing sort of three things. One, immediately abolishing the initial bachelor's and the master's level exam. Licensing graduates to enter into supervised practice on their degrees, allowing potentially hundreds, if not thousands, more social workers to enter the field. And again, this is I know Ms. Richardson didn't come into this until a little later. And then also there was a statement made about the nature of the policy decisions that I have submitted. This is the reality of the case. Secondly, there was a call to address the immediate harm, and to mandate that the Board of Social Workers create a fairer waiver process. So here's the little dirty little secret. The board does give waivers, and it is able to give licenses. So I'd be interested in seeing how many have been waived and for whom, et cetera. So it simply was asking that there be a reasonable waiver process open to those who had failed by a certain number of points. Okay. And then also, ask them to submit some kind of recommendations. The third was to establish a study group and for them to come back in December to really develop and recommend an alternative form. So again, I just want to put out that since 2022, a number of people, of organized advocates, of social workers, practicing social workers, Ms. Richardson's licensed practicing social workers, as well as are acting as allies to those who have not been able to be licensed in Maryland under the current frame. So again, whatever else has been put out there about the intent, that is what this has always been about. I set up a meeting in December December of 2022 and reviewed those and thought that, okay, abolishing just from a legislative perspective, and also it's relatively anew, that we would request a moratorium while the state of Maryland, and again, I want to say this to the board, this is about Maryland. This is about social workers practicing in Maryland. This is about people in Maryland who are receiving. It doesn't, we're not a state, or we should not simply follow or accept or try to take what's happening in Iowa and other states and just simply put it on top of Maryland. This is about developing a Maryland solution. And so that's why we proposed a moratorium. And it was to look at safety, quality, and equity, and that we should study those things. New Jersey did something similar. And then also the idea was to address the workforce shortage and to create pathways. All right. So we put in 2 bills in the moratorium, that was a moratorium and a work group. And then another bill to create a temporary licensure. The idea was that while there was a moratorium, there would be this temporary where we could address the immediately people who have met all other requirements, allow them to immediately begin to get a license and practice until the work of the group move forward. So the bill was, those 2 bills were put in, and I, again, due in part to the advocacy of the board, but also I think it was really good, actually, and ultimately a good thing to have a work group and to begin to come up with something. So one of the things I'll let you know that we experienced was that immediately when I put in 871 and 872, and maybe the board can clarify who hired them, et cetera, but there were at least 3 lobbyists, and this is, I'm talking about session 23. There were 3 lobbyists who really fought the bill, even as established as a moratorium, even established as a work group. Fortunately, HDO and finance did allow for the work group to move forward and to get its work. And so then comes the bill for this year. I will tell you that because of all the good work that you all have done, originally, if you recall, HDO was somewhat not sure about the bill. I think that they were siding and wanting to believe that the State Board of Social Work had the interests of the practice and everyone all interested parties at the forefront. And so they were actually the body that needed to be convinced. And even the chair herself came into this supporting the national exam. And based on what you hear, which is what we do as legislators, we hear information, we bow, and sometimes you change an opinion or you adjust your approach. And HTO, was very supportive and ready to go. The challenge came on our side. Again, the ASWB hired the highest cost lobbyists in the state. And they also look like they did initiate some surveys. So or polls. So I am very interested in who actually drafted the poll that the board implemented. So they did a calling campaign to social workers. So at the very least, your pool was biased because ASWB did do a call to thousands of social workers in specific legislative districts, having them to advocate against the bill. Okay, so just letting you all know what we were up at, what you all and all of us were up against from a political and advocacy. I learned that the ASWB's annual revenues is about $18 million at least, might be a little more than that, and 17 million of it came from the exam. I think that if we had known that at the beginning, I think that there, in terms of the composition of the work group, there might have been some different layouts. We don't usually have organizations that have an economic interest in the outcome on a work group that's, doing policy. So I think that's our mistake, and that won't happen again. So just to let you know, the bill came in as it came in, but I met with, and Delegate Cullison, please feel free to jump in here because you were, also so much. I met with the chair individually. I met with, chair, I met with lots of folks to go over what we were considering, to have them read the report and the recommendations. I had actually thought that we were moving somewhere, but every time I had an interaction, with a member on the committee, I was hearing ASWB's talking points. And so I did begin to become concerned, but I think a little late. With regard to the legislative process, there were a number of, and the amendment process, there were sort of concerns raised by the Board of Examiners, by the committee members, and I drafted some amendments, to address those concerns. So, and again, in plenty of time. So you draft an amendment, you share the amendments with the chair of the committee, you share the amendments with members, and so I just want to share with you, just to be on the record, that the original bill I sought to amend the original bill to address these. So Kara, could you put in the first, okay, I see, you said the first amendments. So the first set of amendments was to extend the work of the work group. So recognize that while there was the recommendation about no longer requiring it for just the bachelor's level and the master's level, that there were questions about, well, how are you going to do it, et cetera. I said, well, you know what, that makes sense, right? So we would extend the work of the work group, and also have it, as you see here, to include in its, I don't know if you're able to share it or not, but if you guys click on it, you can read it yourselves. But it was the amendments were to propose regulations to implement. That is very common. So it would have been it was giving to the Board of Social Work Examiners the ability to draft regulations to implement this. So again, in terms of the assumption of partnership in resolving this, was codified, would have been codified, and it's always assumed. So then, of course, the amendments and, included the same number of people and kind of all the same details. But again, it was specifically the regulations, and the regulations are the things that say exactly how it's going to work. We really try not to do all that, but we probably will have to do that in this case. The next set of amendments, and again, that I shared with the chair, because there was concerns, as you said, about the assumption that, oh, this is abolishing it, nobody can take the exam. What about the compact? By the way, I was on record of saying we should not have passed the compact until we were done our work here, but clearly it was more important to pass the compact because of the entities that will financially benefit from that. And I'm not talking about the social workers who are able to work, but again, when we trace ASWB and its relationship to Pearson and all these testing entities, the financial motivation to limit opting out is clear. But the amendment would really, again, would add some more members, talk about, who can apply, that they have to review, that the applicants applying, they're going to get some kind of notification, just kind of lay it. But what instead it says, rather than exempting and say you can't take the exam, look at this. The board may not consider the results of a licensure examination when determining the eligibility of an applicant who is applying for a license. In other words, what you can begin the application process without demonstrating passage of the exam. That is, again, very different. So you're beginning. It did not require it at that time. Then it can't make any, because folks were saying, oh, well, there's going to be some people who are licensed by exam and some people who aren't licensed by exam. That is not current practice. And again, I will alert the board at this time, if anywhere on any of your documents that you are distinguishing between people in any kind of way, and I'm assuming that the people that were licensed prior to 1999 and who did not, or 94, and who did not pass the exam, I'm assuming none of those have an asterisk by their licensure. And if they do, then that should be removed. And so it prohibits the board from distinguishing whether or not they're licensed with an exam. And then it says the board shall develop procedures to ensure prompt and equitable applications considered. So that is what the bill would have been. So the bill that we, in adopting the amendments, the committee would have passed a bill that extended the work of the work group and saying, yeah, we need more work to kind of figure this out and to work in partnership with the examiners to develop the process. And then 2, not ban the exam, but say that cannot be the sole criteria, which currently it is. So by allowing the exam to have veto power over thousands of hours of supervised practice, of all the exams that you took as an undergraduate, of all the learning and all of that, the experiences, that a single exam failed by 1 point gets to veto the determinations of the Marylanders who we empower to train and educate social workers, and that has always been the exam. So pushing that forward and attempting that, that the bill kind kind of sat. There was a lot of sort of technical things that happened. And it sat and sat and sat and had to push, had to advocate and caucus. We had to talk to just to get the committee to vote on the bill. Again, HDO stood ready, but they weren't going to pass a bill that would then just sit, in the Senate. I appreciate and I regret in some way. I regret clearly. Swear you could smell, you could tell what was going on before I did. I was unwilling to accept that the committee I was just unwilling to accept that what happened ultimately happened. And so your desire for more stringent advocacy and, calling people's positions out and all of that is what should have happened. And again, I regret that. And I just had hoped that we were just all working collaboratively and that we were all being very honest about a willingness to move the bill in a reasonable way. So just like I've seen some of the gloves come off today, I think that's where I am at this point. So the amendment that ended, so the pressure to pass the bill was such that the chair was like, okay, we're going to move the bill. Well, none of the amendments that we gave the committee were ever considered or voted on by the committee. Committee members never saw my amendments. The amendments were given, again, this is on the record, the amendments were given to committee staff. The amendments were discussed in a meeting with the chair. The amendments were, properly drafted. And in a frustration, we drafted the amendments again under our name, because what typically happens, you have to have a member of the committee draft the bill, draft the amendments at times. Some committees accept other members' committees. It just really depends on the chair. So we went ahead and had them drafted under our name and again offered, but they were not, the amendments were not offered. But there was such political pressure to pass the bill. They passed the bill. But the bill that was passed, as you know, was, as just what was just said, to me was an affront to everything that this work group had worked on, and an affront to the practice of all social workers, and just to the legislative process, and unfortunately shows the influence, the over-influence of lobbied moneyed interests in a way that is just so inconsistent with the practice of social work. But anyway, the bill as amended came out to say that the work group was going to examine alterations to the ASW board and examine its implementation of the 3-option multiple choice questions of a modular exam format. 2, it directed the board to examine the implementation of the policies of the Association of Board of Social Works for them allowing for accommodations and arrangements for test takers for disabilities in English. And 3, we were supposed to review the provisions of the test taker and education exam, and that in a year, there would be a report to the Senate committee, not December of this year, 2025, but December of 2026. So to allow existing practices, existing disparities to continue for additional time, and then ask whether to continue to use the Board of Social, whether to use the exam. I was shocked to read that. It came to the floor. I held it and went back to the committee, talked to people, said, well, how can you do this? This makes no sense. I mean, are we really going to ask these people to make a recommendation when we've ignored this committee, your committee ignored their what would be different in a year and a half. And then two, what was also offensive and I could not understand is that how did the work group, a Maryland work group established by the legislature, would become an advisory committee to the ASWB? Because as you see, it says we're supposed to examine ASWB, right? Their implementation. Wondered how would that happen? Again, it just made no sense. So I took the essentially I just kept talking and talking about the bill and the challenges and calling out the good work of the committee to the point where it was re-referred to committee. And that does, kill it. But I said, I can't vote for this bill, as it came out of the group. And I knew that the floor was not educated enough, even though I had drafted, I drafted the amendments that I had proposed to the committee to the floor. I knew that with the timing, it came out so late that I could not pass those amendments on the floor. And even if we did, it was after crossover. So the bill would have just sat in rules. No, you all would have pulled it out probably, but it just probably would not have passed. So that's what happened. Cullison, maybe you can talk a little bit what happened on your side, and then we can wrap up. But we learned a lot. Just to say, I learned a lot. Even though I've been a legislator for 15 years, I learned a tremendous amount of the things I need to look for, the types of strategies when you are really making change, like really substantive change that's going to make a difference in the lives of people whose voices and concerns are rarely lifted up. How challenging it could be. Rather, I was reminded, because I've done this type of battle before, but I was just reminded. Delegate.
And I won't take very long. I, absolutely associate myself with all of your remarks, Senator. But I think one of the things that is the most important takeaway about this is the level of understanding that the legislators have to have in order to make informed decisions. Because frankly, the Finance Committee, it's only its second year in terms of dealing with the health occupations boards.
Exactly.
So they're not used to it. They are, and which means that the members of that committee have not had the kind of experience before in terms of dealing with these very difficult and complex issues. And so they were listening to people that they had a lot of confidence in, that they are very familiar with, who work with them all the time, and were trusting that what they were saying was the right thing. I'm not saying, I'm not making any judgments here. I'm just saying, I think that's what got us to the place we are now. I think it's really important that we proceed with this work in the way that is the most strategic, because I believe that we all share the desire to have a fully accessible social work network in Maryland to serve our Marylanders. And right now we know that there are some issues that are presenting some barriers to them, and we have to work together to figure out how to remove those barriers. So I'm willing to continue to work whatever capacity and whatever format we need to do, but I do not believe the work ends here. So thank you, Senator.
And same for me. I'm even more committed. I can't imagine being more committed, but I am even more. I'm a Taurus, so we're going to keep going.
Just to be clear, the HGO committee was ready to pass the bill.
Absolutely.
We were just waiting for it to come over from the not the final bill, but the bill that had Senator Washington's amendments in it. So we
Absolutely.
were just waiting for it.
Yep. Yep.
Great,
And I
thank
do
you.
think we have the votes on the committee, by the way, Cullison, I think if it had been brought forward, but let's go ahead. Sorry, there are hands raised.
Okay, thank you so much for giving us that information.